Hello everyone, welcome back to the one more session of Management Information System. Now we were discussing about the topic called the decision making. So let us recall about what we have discussed in the previous session. In the previous session, we had discussed about the organization decision making concepts, where we have discussed the various issues that are prevailed with respect to the decision making and the misunderstandings between the various levels, various management levels, managemental persons, and also various managers in the organization. So decision making of at the organization level would overcome all the misbehaving things or the inequalities with respect to the different levels of workers that we have seen that. And secondly, we have seen that the MIS and the decision making process, where we have seen the concepts of the Herbert Simon model, how does it support with respect to the decision making. And we have also seen the three concepts in a broad sense, that is the information, knowledge and the business intelligence. In that we had started about the information, a clear differentiation between the information and the data was made, and the importance of information was also discussed, and the various concepts pertaining to the information was also discussed in the previous session. And we have seen about the various characteristics that compromises or that are said to be the constitutes of information. We have gone through it. And next we have also seen the beautiful definition of Davis and Olson, and we have described the Davis and Olson definition with help of a diagram. So those are the topics that we had already discussed. Now let us move into the new thing called as organization as a system. Why do we need to consider the organization as a system is the important things. The first thing is, when an individual needs or when an individual meets with an organization, each individual has a different needs in an organization, okay, where individual works for his own benefit and also the benefits of an organization. So his needs, his decision are with respect to two aspects. One is with respect to individual and other is with respect to an organization. Whereas in the organization we are need to consider totally the concept with respect to organization, where in the previous session also I had discussed no individual room should be given, whereas if individual concepts of our personally or a preference is given to a personal person or a friend of mine or a well-known person, that becomes biasing. So the very important concept is the organization needs to be considered as a system, as a whole, whereas each and everyone are just integral part of an organization. Next, there is a concept called Levitin. A person called Levitt described a model to state that organization is an system, an organization cannot work on a particular person, a particular branch or particular department or particular functionality. Organization is said to be a system which constitutes various commodities or various elements into it to form one complete whole to process the operation and reach the goal. So Levitt describes few elements, so stating that the organization is a system. So let us look into the components one by one. The first component, he says, is task. So different tasks are given to different individuals. So the task that is performed by one person is totally different with the task performed by a second person, because each and every person in an organization are placed at a different level, at a different positions and different culture and different nature of the work. So each and everyone should be assigned a task so that no two person carries the same task, so that concurrency is done. Or if a same task is assigned to two person, the work will not get to be finished up, because each person says let this person do, or someone says let this person do. When the work task is assigned individually, so each one looks or concentrates into his individual completion of work. Second is the technology. A greater importance has to be given with respect to technology, because we need to consider the advanced technology to come up, because if we use the old conventional method of technology, we are not able to cope up with the current trends and the techniques. So if we use the latest technology, we are able to advance ourselves and the production can also be introduced. And the third one is the structure. In an organization, a proper skeleton structure has to be formed. When you call about skeleton structure, it is nothing but the hierarchy. Who has to do what information has to flow to which level, and which level is responsible for what kind of work. All these things has to be predefined in very clearly in an organization. If things are not very clear or differentiated between the work at the different level, uncertainty prevails. Then everyone thinks that is not my part of job. So the work totally remains untouched. And finally, the people. When we talk about people, a proper recruitment has to be done. The right kind of people to be assigned with the right job. So before assigning, we need to look into the temperament and the advancement and also the knowledge that has been prevailed in the people. So we need to take a right person with the right sound of knowledge in order to work in an organization. Let us discuss with help of a diagram. Let us look of Leavitt model. So as I discussed, so task can have a privilege like this. Then people and technology can also be considered as a different entity. Where tasks are there, people are there, technology there, structures are there. When you say about structure, it is the standard rules or the hierarchy. When all these things are there, is one more thing when you talk about the practicality of an organization, that is the work culture. So work culture is very important in an organization. If everyone intends to focus on the thing, then the other person who joins newly also intends to work with the same culture of the organization. Now, how does this all together become a system? Let us consider a small scenario where we have seen the computers, monitors, keyboard, mouse, CPU, etc. When it is individually taken, these are said to be an entity. When a keyboard is taken, we don't say it as a system, we just say it as keyboard. When a monitor is taken, we don't call it as a system, we call it as a just monitor. But whereas when we connect all together, we call it as a system, because that makes it complete. In the similar way, look into this. These are the different components that needs to be considered to form an organization. Now this is not a complete system. So how do we do it? We need to interconnect between one another. Look at this connectivity. It is not that cyclic, even it can go like this. Even this can be connected like this, or they can be directly connected like this. Any way of approach is possible. Those are all bidirectional. So even the task can have direct contact. Even the task can have direct with respect to the culture. Similarly, structure, everything. Look at this. The intention of saying all these things, this has become indirectly a star in nature. Means when all those things are combined together, it forms an organization. When all the things are achieved, are interlinked, then the information flows to one entity to or one component to another in an easy way. Then we can say our goals are achieved in between. So goals now is been focused as a centered point. Now when all these things are interlinked, we can see our goals or the objectives is been totally centered in the system. Now that is what we look into the organization as a system. So when we look as an organization as a system, we are able to make decisions properly, because here there is no scope or room for individual concepts or individual ideas or individual opinion. We are looking as an organization completely. So this is about the organization as a system. Next. Next, we will look into the one more concept stating that conceptual model of communication. Okay. So we have seen why the communication or a flow of information is needed. So in the first class itself, I have told you the one important concept that MIS system is like an heart, okay, in a human body, whereas information is something like a blood, where a heart needs to pump the data and purify it and makes it into a pure blood and circulates to the all parts of the body. When the pure blood circulates to all parts of the body keeps working, regenerated and energized. In the same way, MIS system collects the data, purifies it and circulates to all the things, all the parts or all the entities of an organization. So when we talk about the circulation, here comes the concept of communication, whether it might be a data or it might be an information. It needs to be transmitted from one place to another. When it needs to be transmitted, we consider two components. One, that is source. Source is a place where data is there, so we call this as a sender. When we want to send this information, it is transmitted. So during the process of transmitting, the information is encoded in the transmitter. It is something like, best example that can be considered here is when we want to write a letter from one person to the other person. Consider me, I want to write a letter to my friend. What I do? I write a letter. I am the source where he is the destination. What I do? After writing the letter, I close it and put it in an envelope, seal it and send to the person. At the receiving stage, what he does? The information is not the cover itself. The information is inside the cover. What he does? He reopens the cover, that is encodes the cover and takes up the letter and reads the information. In the similar way, source wants to send the information. During the process of sending, the transmitter encodes the information, and after encoding, it has to pass through a medium. We call it as channel. The medium in which the information is transmitted from the source to destination is called the channel. At the receiving end, what does the receiver do? Receiver decodes. Look at this, where here it is encoded. The process of doing the reverse components of encoding is called decoding. Here at the receiver decodes the information which has been encoded from the transmitter, sender side, then it would be received. Then the receiver receives the information. So during the transmission, there are possibility of getting noise or distortion, the unwanted things, because here the source person or a source is not sending the unwanted things, noise or distortion. When you say noise or distortion, these are the unwanted errors that creep into the channel along with the information that goes to the sender without the knowledge of the source or the person who is sending it. So without the permission of the source, that gets creeped into it. So this is how we call it as the conceptual model of communication. Now let us look, we have seen about information, the types of information, the conceptual model of information, that is communication, then how to present it. That is information presentation. Very important concept. Now, information presentation is not just easier thing. It is said to be an art. Presentation is not the thing that can be learned just by learning or just by seeing. It is the art of experiencing. So, it comes over a period of time. Now, you might be saying the data may be collected with very tedious task. Okay, in the best possible ways, by analyzing, by manipulating, by bringing the values from here and there, whatever it might be, you might have collected the very good data and you might have processed it, but if you don't present it in a beautiful way or in a required way, that is of no use. If a receiver rejects it, saying that this is of no use, then the amount of effort that you have put to collect the data, process the data, everything goes into vain. So presentation is the key role with respect to the information. This is how you make the receiver feel comfortable, or how you make the receiver or a manager satisfied with what you get is said to be the value of presentation, that is the information value. Now, the degree of communication is affected in the methods of transmission, means so how well the communication happens is also considered. It is not only presentation, the amount of presentation also matters. See, let us consider, you students are so kind enough to listen to it, that doesn't mean that I am ready, I keep on giving you for the lecture for more than 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. I cannot extend it, because even there is a limitation from your side. You might be patiently listening, okay, very calm and patient listening for 40 minutes, 50 minutes or 1 hour. That after that you lose your patience. We should understand that. In the similar way, the presentation of information is as good as important as with respect to the receiver's view also. Let us consider one small scenario with respect to the information presentation with an example of an exam. Most of you, when you hear the word called exam, most of you students are afraid of it. So thinking that they are testing us. Exams would gauge our knowledge. No, I call it as, it is not a gauging of a knowledge. And I have listened to this statement made by a student. They say, sir, I study daily, okay, but I have scored only 75% in the exam. And look at that person, sir, XYZ person. He never studies. He always keeps playing. Whenever I see him, he will be outside. He will be not with the book. But in the exams, he has scored 80. How is it possible, sir? It is not that it is gauging your knowledge. It is that they are trying to know how well you are represented. Okay, so each one, I don't say that someone who scores 80 is a very knowledgeable person, or someone who scores 40, 50 is not a knowledgeable person or a bad person. No, all are equal. But the matter lies here is how well you present what you have, what you listen, what you have in your brains or stored information, how well you represent in the exam is the matters. People have learned, some of the students have learned to represent it very beautifully in the exam. They represent very beautifully and score good marks. That's it. So you should not worry about the gauging that the exam are required to gauge us. No, it is how well you present. Based on the present, they score you. So all are equal. Keeping that in the similar way, represent of information as a value with respect to the receiver. Even it plays a major role in the organization. Information presentation is key. Next, let us consider one more concept. In that concept, we see how information is a quality product. Most of them say, sir, just the information is good, information is needed. How do you sustain or how do you justify information is a very good, this is the right information? Let us see that. Information is a quality product. In many of the paper, this question is asked for 10 marks. Justify information as a quality product. Let us look. When we talk about information, it is not that just a derived data. It is the product of processed data. So information is always the product, end product, whereas data is a raw product. So information is a processed product. When we talk about the information, it is the quality. So the quality should be high with respect to information. Only then it makes an impact to the managers in order to make decisions. What are the parameters that needs to be considered for information to be a very high or a top quality product? The first one is the utility. Second one is the satisfaction. Third one is error. The fourth one is the bias. Now let us look into each component one by one. What do you mean by utility? The utility is the representation of the information in the form, with respect to time, and the access and the possessions. The first thing that comes into the mind is always the information should be presented in the form the manager needs. Okay, if the information is presented in the form that is required by the manager, that becomes very easy. That becomes the utmost utility of a manager. Otherwise, the manager has to transform the information in his requirement form and then process it. So that becomes a tedious work. So always the best utilization of information can be done when the information is already in the form of the requirement. Second one, it should be available when needed. I'll give you one illustration. If you are very hurry with respect to going to some other place, and you ask me, sir, can you lend me a vehicle for 2 minutes? I need to go there and come back immediately. And I say, I will lend you the vehicle, but after 2 minutes, after 2 minutes or 5 minutes. After 2 minutes or 5 minutes, you don't need a vehicle at all. In the similar way, information should be made available at that instance of time. It should be available when it is needed. If it is given after the time, then it's of no use. Means the utility cannot be at most use. Then again, the information should be easily accessible or quickly accessible. I'll give you one more illustration. Whenever you are studying, you have a doubt in a particular thing and you feel like referring into the textbook. If the textbook is somewhere accessible nearby you, what you do? You immediately fetch the textbook, go through it and get satisfied and get clarified your doubts, and you will be satisfied and you will be very much happy. But if the textbook is not at all available, what you do? You leave off the concept itself. Means you don't go further, you don't touch it. So that is the one of the parameter where the always information should be easily available. And finally, when we look into the thing, the information should be available to the person who needs it. It is not that the person who doesn't need it should be available with the information. If I am the manager and if I am making the decision, the information should be in my hands so that I can make a decision. So this is how the best utilization of information can be done. That is with respect to the utility. The second one is the satisfaction. When we talk about the satisfaction, it is the degree that satisfies the person. Means if something is given, if a person is satisfied with that, stating that yes, I can now make a decision looking into it, then that is the second parameter that is said to be the good quality of information. Next we look into the errors. When we say about error, I would like to say errors creep into the information. What do you mean by creep? We say that insects are started creeping into the things, means they come without our knowledge most of the time. How does the errors or other things, unwanted things, creep into the information? The first one, incorrect data measurement. When we are collecting the data, if you are doing it incorrectly if you measure the things stating that it's of no use, let us see later, no, it goes wrong, then error might be there. Second one, incorrect collection of the method. See, data collection has a lot of methods into it. If the proper method is not used while collecting the data, again errors do creep into the information. Next, failure of prescribed data processing. Means there are a lot of process already predefined in order to process the data. If we don't use the predefined process of data processing, again if you are using some other methods, errors do prevail in the information. And loss of data means unknowingly or unknowingly, if some data is lost, because we know that each and every minute in data is very valuable. If we lose some data, again we don't get proper input. In the beginning of the class itself, I have told you that right data, right input gives you good output. Wrong input gives you wrong output. In a similar way, if you do up a wrong concepts with respect to input, obviously errors do creep into it and we get wrong thing. And finally, when you talk about the errors, the poor application processing. When you talk about poor application, if you don't do proper validation, and if there is no control system, proper system or an application in order to validate the data, obviously errors do creep into the system. And finally, deliberately we do some falsification. Well, what is falsification or deliberately we do? Our negligence. We say, okay, it would be running somehow, no problem, let us check this, what happens. Means these kind of negligence should not be prevailed with respect to the information. Our negligence would cause the interruption, or it might cause an error that to creep into the information. Ultimately, we get wrong information. So if these parameters in association with the bias, what do you mean by bias? Doing injustice is said to be a bias. If there are many things to be chosen, if we give up a individual preferences, if we give up a personal preference, I like my friend, so I give him the promotion. I like my friend, so I accept whatever he does. I like my friend, so I'll approve all the process that he has done. What I am doing? I am doing biasing with respect to the organization, taking on the personal preferences, where if this biasing is done, I am not affecting the organization, in turn I am affecting everyone in the organization, including myself. So if organization is there, everyone will be there. If one thing goes wrong, everyone will be affected. So these are the concepts that said to be biased. Now, so if these four parameters are considered in a right proportion, in a proper way, then the information is said to be a good quality product. The first one is the utility, the second component is the satisfaction, the third component is an error, and fourth one is a bias. We need to look into that. All the information always satisfies these four components. So this is what I wanted to say in this session. So in this session we are very clear. We have covered about the organization as a system, conceptual model of communication, information presentation, and also information as a quality product. The four important quality products, that is utility, satisfaction, error and bias. That is the key part which none of them should be forgetting, because it can be expected in all the exams. Okay. Next, the classification information is also called the classification of information as per John Dearden's, and methods of data and information collection. So these are the points with respect to methods of collecting the data and information. This is what I wanted to say in this session. Thank you.